She gave away her only toy to comfort a sick little girl, never knowing the child's father was a billionaire CEO who would soon turn her entire life upside down. The morning had started like any other. The sun filtered softly through the windows of Rosemont Academy, warming the tiled corridors and glinting off the polished floors. Children's voices rose and fell like waves, some laughing, some chattering, others trailing sleepily behind teachers as they moved between classes. In room 2C, the quiet hum of a math lesson filled the space. Lauren Eldridge sat at her desk near the window. Her posture was perfect, as always. Straight back, hands folded, eyes following the teacher's hand as it moved across the board. She was 8, poised beyond her years, a child who had learned early how to stay quiet, listen carefully, and never ask for more than was given. She wore a dark blue cardigan over her school uniform, her chestnut hair clipped neatly to one side. Her classmates didn't know much about her, other than that her father was someone important. A man with a car that never waited at the curb more than 10 seconds, and a security guard who always stood by the exit with a distant, unreadable stare. But Lauren never bragged, never sought attention. She carried a small pink notebook with her everywhere, drawing quietly when she was finished with classwork. Mostly little rabbits, trees, the moon. That day, however, something was off. It started as a flutter in her chest, just under her ribs, then a strange heat crawling up the back of her neck. She blinked quickly, gripping her pencil tighter, trying to stay focused. The numbers on the board blurred slightly. Her stomach felt strange, not like a normal ache. It felt wrong, sharp. She pressed a hand against her side. "Lauren!" the teacher's voice called from the front of the room. Her head lifted slowly, but she didn't respond. Her face had gone pale, lips slightly parted. Her hand trembled. "Lauren, are you all right?" The classroom stilled. Even the fidgeters went quiet. I don't, she tried to say, but her voice broke. And then she crumpled sideways off her chair. There was a gasp. Someone screamed. The teacher was beside her in seconds. "Call the nurse, now!" Moments later, a call was placed to emergency services. Lauren was barely conscious, her breathing shallow, pulse erratic. The school nurse tried to keep her awake, but she kept slipping in and out. The ambulance arrived in under 10 minutes. She was loaded into the back with care, her small body dwarfed by the stretcher and oxygen mask. A paramedic asked her name. She didn't answer. He checked her chart. The name caught his eye. Eldridge. His eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing. As the doors closed and sirens started, the school principal dialed a number from a private file labeled Emergency Contact, Primary Guardian. He expected a secretary, a personal assistant. Instead, the call went directly to voicemail. Thousands of miles away in a glass tower overlooking Singapore's Marina Bay, Robert Eldridge was staring out the window of a conference room. He wasn't listening to the man beside him, someone from the global finance team going over quarterly projections. Robert's eyes tracked a ship moving slowly across the harbor. His fingers tapped once against the armrest of his chair. He had felt distracted all morning, restless, something in his gut. His phone buzzed, twice, then again. He glanced at the screen, 3 missed calls, unknown number. His brow furrowed. He stood up abruptly, cutting off the presentation. "I need 5 minutes," he said, already walking toward the door. He stepped into the hallway and called back. The voice on the other end was tight, official. "This is Dr. Howard from St. Gabriel's Pediatric Hospital in New York. Are you the father of Lauren Eldridge?" "Yes," Robert answered immediately, his voice turning sharp. "What happened?" "She was brought in by ambulance from her school with acute abdominal symptoms. We've confirmed it's an advanced case of appendicitis with signs of rupture. We're taking her in for emergency surgery right now. You need to—" But Robert didn't hear the rest. The blood drained from his face. His world, which had been so orderly, so scheduled, so relentlessly under control, shattered in a single sentence. His little girl was in an operating room without him, alone. He barely remembered grabbing his things. His assistant called after him, but he didn't answer. He was already on the phone with his pilot, ordering the jet to be fueled and ready in 15 minutes. He didn't care about protocol. He didn't care about the summit he was meant to lead the next morning. For the first time in years, none of it mattered. His daughter was in danger, and he wasn't there. As the elevator descended, Robert's heart pounded in his chest. Not from panic, but from something worse. Guilt. Heavy and hot. He had always justified the long hours, the travel, the missed dinners, the phone calls he made instead of kisses goodnight. She was safe. She was cared for. She had everything she needed, everything except him. Now she was lying in a hospital bed, and he was 12 time zones away. And all the money in the world couldn't buy him a second chance. The sliding doors of Seiyun. Gabriel's pediatric hospital opened and closed in rhythm, letting in the cold wind of a New York afternoon. Ambulances came and went. Footsteps echoed against white-tiled floors. Monitors beeped steadily behind curtains. It was a place where urgency lived, but routine never disappeared. Emma Blake, 30 years old, adjusted the collar of her light blue scrubs and pulled her dark hair into a neater bun as she clocked in for the night shift. She worked 3 to 4 evenings a week, sometimes more if there was a staff shortage. People said she was dependable, always calm, always steady. Patients liked her soft voice and warm hands, children especially. But what no one really saw, not the doctors, not even the other nurses, was how much she felt. Every child reminded her, even just a little, of the one she used to be. Quiet, watchful, waiting for someone to stay. Her father had been in the Navy. He wasn't gone forever, just gone enough. The last time she saw him, she was 6. He knelt in front of her with a small stuffed rabbit in his hands, its ears slightly crooked. "He's brave," her dad said, placing the toy in her arms. "Like you." He died overseas 2 months later. The rabbit remained. It was old now, worn, faded. She kept it hidden in her locker at the hospital, her secret anchor to the past, a reminder of the man who made her feel safest, even if only for a short while. The intercom buzzed just as she finished tying her laces. Trauma Bay 2, incoming pediatric transfer from Rosemont Academy. ETA, 5 minutes. Emma felt her spine straighten. A school call meant something sudden, something bad. She hurried toward the trauma wing, meeting the pediatric surgeon, Dr. Liu, who was already donning gloves and checking scans sent ahead by the ambulance. Girl, 8 years old. Name's Lauren Eldridge. Acute abdominal pain, vomiting, collapse during class. They suspect a ruptured appendix. We're prepping for immediate surgery. Emma's mind caught on the name. Eldridge. Not just familiar, famous. The billionaire tech magnate. She'd seen his name in headlines, his company in investor reports. Even spotted his photo once on the cover of a magazine someone left in the break room. But none of that mattered right now. Right now it was just a little girl on a gurney, pale and sweating, lips parted, unconscious. Emma stepped forward as the paramedics wheeled her in. She gently brushed Lauren's hair away from her forehead, feeling the heat radiating off her. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, even though the girl didn't stir. "You're safe. We've got you." Within minutes, they had her on monitors. IV started, vitals taken. The surgery team moved quickly and precisely. Emma stayed just outside the OR doors, watching through the glass. Lauren was so small, alone. No parents, no family pacing the halls, only silence. Hours passed. The operation was difficult, but successful. Lauren was moved to post-op recovery, then into a quiet corner room on the 5th floor. Emma asked to stay on her case for the rest of the night. No one questioned her. At 2:47 a.m., Lauren stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. She moaned softly, shifting against the pillows. Emma leaned in immediately. "Hey there," she said softly. "You're okay. You're in the hospital. You had surgery. You're going to be all right." Lauren blinked up at her, confused, disoriented. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Emma reached for a small cup of ice chips, gently feeding her one. "I'm Emma," she said. "I'm your nurse. I'm going to be right here." Lauren looked around the room, panic flickering behind her eyes. "My dad." Emma nodded gently. "He's coming. He's on his way." The girl said nothing. She simply stared at the ceiling, her expression far too old for her age, like someone who had already learned not to expect too much. Emma sat beside her bed. "I know it's scary," she said after a few minutes. "You're probably sore and tired and confused, but you're safe now." Silence. Then in the quietest voice, Lauren whispered, "I wasn't supposed to cry at school." Emma smiled gently. "You can cry whenever you want. Even superheroes do." Lauren didn't cry. Not then. She simply turned her face to the side and closed her eyes again. Emma didn't leave. When the room dimmed into half light and the other nurses returned to their stations, Emma sat in the soft hospital chair, legs tucked beneath her, the silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the occasional hum of the heating vent. She watched Lauren sleep, one small hand fisted around the edge of her blanket. Something about her struck Emma deep. It wasn't her name, or the money, or the headlines. It was the way she clenched her jaw even in sleep, the way she hadn't called for anyone, the way she tried, even now, to be strong. Emma stood up quietly, walked down the corridor, and opened her locker. She reached inside and pulled out the small stuffed rabbit. His fur thinned with time, one eye a little loose, one ear flopped permanently forward. She held it for a moment, hesitating. Then she walked back to Lauren's room and gently placed the rabbit beside her on the pillow. When Lauren woke again an hour later, her fingers found it immediately. She didn't ask where it came from. She just held on. And for the first time that night, she slept deeply. The sun had already risen over New York when Robert Eldridge's private jet touched down on the tarmac. The sky was a soft gray, streaked with pink and gold, but the man who stepped out of the aircraft barely noticed it. He looked disheveled, but not in the way most people imagined a billionaire would look. Not calculated messiness, not curated exhaustion. No, this was something raw. His tailored suit was creased from the 10-hour flight, his usually neat hair slightly undone. His face, handsome and refined under normal circumstances, was drawn with sleeplessness. His jaw was set, lips pressed in a hard line as if holding something back. His assistant trailed behind him, trying to keep pace, but Robert said nothing. He walked with intent, every movement clipped and singular. A black SUV waited on the tarmac. The driver opened the door before he reached it. "St. Gabriel's," Robert said simply. "Fast." The drive felt longer than the flight. His fingers tapped restlessly against the leather armrest. At one point, he pulled out his phone to check for updates. Nothing. Just the hospital's confirmation message. Condition stable. In post-op care. Awake intermittently. Intermittently wasn't enough. He needed to see her. He needed to hear her voice. He needed to not have failed her. At 7:32 a.m., Robert walked through the front doors of St. Gabriel's Pediatric Hospital. The receptionist recognized him instantly, not because of his fame, but because she had been warned. "Room 503, she said quietly, pointing him toward the elevators. He took the stairs instead. He didn't want to wait another second. When he reached the 5th floor, his heart was pounding. Not from exertion, from something deeper. Fear, guilt, and something far more terrifying than either. Love. He slowed outside the room. The door was ajar. Through the narrow opening, he saw her. Lauren, his daughter. Lying in a hospital bed, impossibly small beneath a white sheet, her brown hair mussed across the pillow, a faint flush on her cheeks. Her eyes were closed, but her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. And sitting beside her, in a chair pulled close to the bed, was a woman he didn't know. She wore scrubs. Her dark hair was pulled into a bun. Her posture was tired but upright, and she was holding a small clipboard in her lap, though it looked like she hadn't glanced at it in a while. She wasn't just monitoring Lauren. She was present, watching, protecting. And then he noticed something else. The stuffed rabbit in Lauren's arms. He didn't recognize it. It wasn't one of the expensive plush toys from their home. It was old, loved, the kind of toy that meant something. For a long moment, Robert stood there unmoving. The nurse turned her head and saw him. She didn't flinch or rise dramatically. She just nodded once. A quiet acknowledgement and something else. A silent reassurance. He stepped inside. His shoes barely made a sound on the linoleum. Lauren stirred at the sound, eyelids fluttering open. Her gaze locked on his instantly. "Daddy," she said softly, almost like she didn't believe he was real. He crossed the room in 2 strides and was by her side, kneeling so he could be level with her face. "I'm here," he said. His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." She didn't say anything, but her hand reached for his. He took it and brought it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Her skin was warm. Too warm. "I should have been here," he murmured. "I should have." "She was never alone," the nurse said quietly. He looked up. Her voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't self-congratulatory. It was simple, grounded. I'm Emma, she said. I was on shift when she came in. I stayed with her. Robert stared at her. There was something unfamiliar about this. The tone, the steadiness, the complete lack of pretense. Most people looked at him with awe or calculation. She looked at him like a man, a father, nothing more. Thank you, he said, his voice husky. You don't need to thank me, she replied. She needed someone. I had someone once who stayed with me when I needed it most. I just passed it on. His eyes dropped to the rabbit again. Yours? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Robert took a slow breath. He stood, adjusting his jacket like it was the only thing grounding him. I don't know how to process this, he admitted. I spend my life making things efficient, organized, prepared, and now I feel like I've never been more useless. Emma tilted her head slightly. You're not useless. You're her anchor. You just have to be here. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to Lauren, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She was already drifting back to sleep, her fingers still curled around the rabbit's ear. He pulled the chair closer and sat down, not looking at his phone, not checking the time, not thinking about the meetings he was missing. For the first time in years, nothing else mattered. Emma lingered for a moment longer, then stepped quietly out of the room. She didn't need to stay now. The person Lauren needed had come. But neither of them knew, not yet, that something had shifted forever in those few quiet hours between fear and arrival. Not just for Lauren, but for all three of them. The next 24 hours unfolded like something suspended in warm, slow-moving light. Lauren's fever began to break by the following morning, her pain steadily controlled, her color returning bit by bit. She spoke more now, quietly in short bursts. She asked questions that showed just how much she had been holding inside. Did you fly through the night? Were you scared when you heard? What time is it in Singapore right now? Robert answered everyone with a softness that surprised even himself. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't take any calls. He only left her room to use the bathroom or get her more juice. At one point, when she asked him to braid her hair, like the nurses do, he sat with trembling fingers and did his best, even though the final result was crooked and lopsided. She smiled anyway, and that was enough. It wasn't until later in the afternoon that Emma returned to the 5th floor, out of uniform and off duty. She had signed out at 7 a.m., but her mind hadn't left the hospital. She wasn't sure why she came back. She told herself she'd forgotten her badge, but really she just wanted to know if Lauren was okay. Something about that child, her silence, her strength, the way she clutched the rabbit, had etched into Emma's chest. She walked down the hallway, still wearing a worn sweatshirt and dark jeans, her badge swinging from a clip on her pocket. She expected to peek through the door and leave unnoticed, but when she reached the room, Lauren was awake, and she saw her immediately. Emma, the girl said, sitting up straighter in bed. Her face lit up in a way Robert hadn't seen in days. Emma smiled, stepping through the doorway. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't? Are you working again? No, Emma said gently. Just checking in. Robert looked up from the corner of the room where he'd been sitting in the hospital recliner, a coffee cup in one hand. He hadn't shaved and his tie was long gone. He looked better, though, like the weight of waiting had lifted, if only a little. I'm glad you're here, he said. She was asking when you'd come back. Emma raised an eyebrow. Is that true, or did you just want a break from answering space trivia questions? Robert chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Let's call it both. Lauren patted the edge of the bed. You can sit. Emma hesitated, then moved closer, careful not to disrupt the tubes or IV. The stuffed rabbit was still tucked under Lauren's arm. Is he being brave? Emma asked. He's being amazing, Lauren whispered. He didn't leave. Neither did you, Emma thought, but didn't say it out loud. Robert watched the exchange in silence. There was something calming in the way Emma spoke to Lauren. Not just the words, but the rhythm. She didn't use the patronizing tone adults often used with children. She spoke to her like an equal, a real person, a little soul. After a while, Robert stood. I'll get you both some tea, he said, the good kind from the cafe downstairs. He caught Emma's eyes for a moment, just a flicker, before walking out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Emma looked at Lauren, who was playing absently with a corner of her blanket. You know, your dad seems like he's learning how to sit still. Lauren grinned, and for a second, she looked like any child. Not the daughter of a mogul, not a patient recovering from surgery, just a girl who had found peace again. He talks different when he's here, she said. He doesn't sound like the phone voice. Emma tilted her head. What's the phone voice? You know, Lauren said with exaggerated seriousness, deepening her tone and squaring her shoulders. This is Robert Eldridge. Let's circle back by end of quarter. Emma burst out laughing. That's terrifyingly accurate. I practice, Lauren said proudly. They both giggled for a few more seconds before the girl's voice turned softer. I didn't think he'd make it in time. Emma's smile faded gently. She reached out, brushing a hand over Lauren's wrist. He did, she said, and he hasn't left since. When Robert returned, carrying 2 paper cups and a small tray of sugar packets and lemon slices, the sound of his daughter's laughter, real free laughter, met him before he even opened the door. And when he stepped inside and saw them, Emma seated at the edge of the bed, Lauren leaning against her pillow with flushed cheeks and glowing eyes, he felt something shift again, something he hadn't expected, something he didn't quite have words for yet. He handed Emma one of the cups. Chamomile, he said. They only had 2 left, so I threatened to buy the whole building. She smiled, accepting the tea. I'm sure the barista trembled. She gave me a free biscotti. Of course she did. Their eyes met. It was just a moment, but something passed between them, a kind of recognition, not romance, not yet. Something deeper, understanding. That night, after Lauren had drifted to sleep and the machines hummed softly around her, Emma stood to leave. Her shift hadn't started. She had no reason to stay. But as she reached the door, Robert's voice stopped her. Emma, she turned. I'm not good at this, he said quietly. Saying things, asking for help. Emma folded her arms gently. You don't need to be good at it. You just have to mean it. He nodded slowly. I just wanted you to know. What you did for her, I'll never forget it. Emma hesitated, then said something she hadn't planned. Maybe you weren't the only one who needed to know someone would stay. And then she was gone. But her words lingered, long after the lights dimmed, long after Robert sat back down in the chair by his daughter's bed, long after he looked at the small rabbit in her arms and realized how easily something simple, something selfless, could break through even the thickest walls. The hospital began to fade into rhythm again. The alarms, once urgent, now simply blinked. The nurses rotated shifts. Lauren's chart moved from red tag to routine. And somewhere between the echoes of footsteps and the clatter of rolling trays, normalcy started to creep in, slowly like light slipping under a door. Lauren was healing. The incisions from surgery were neat and healing well. Her appetite was back. Her color had returned. She no longer drifted in and out of sleep like she had in those first blurry hours. Now she sat up in bed, coloring or reading, always with a stuffed rabbit nestled against her side. She named him Captain because he saved me when I didn't feel brave. The staff adored her, but it was Emma she waited for. Every shift, without fail, Lauren asked, Is Nurse Emma working tonight? And every time she was told no, she frowned for a moment and then resumed coloring, trying to hide her disappointment. Emma noticed, and even though she was only assigned to Lauren for the initial post-op night, she started making excuses to check in, bringing extra pudding cups, asking if someone needed help restocking linens near room 503. One night, she left a little origami rabbit folded from hospital menu paper on Lauren's tray. The next night, Lauren had made one of her own. Robert noticed, too. He had seen plenty of people orbit around his world for all the wrong reasons. Opportunists, charmers, manipulators who hid behind kindness and then reached for contracts. But Emma didn't ask questions. She didn't tiptoe around his name. She didn't even seem interested in him. And strangely, that was what made him curious. They started talking, quietly, briefly, and always around Lauren. The conversations were simple at first. Does she like apple juice or grape better? She prefers grape, but only if it's cold. How was the night? She slept most of it. She asked if you knew how to braid yet. But eventually the conversations expanded, grew, deepened. Late one evening, Emma walked into the room to find Robert sitting beside Lauren's bed with his laptop open, but the screen black. He hadn't typed a thing. You're still here, she said. He glanced at her, weary but not annoyed. Where else would I be? She tilted her head. You own an empire. Don't they notice when their emperor vanishes? They noticed, he admitted, but they adjusted. Emma smirked. What kind of world just adjusts when the king leaves? The kind that was never real in the first place. The way he said it surprised her. Not bitter, but hollow, like someone stating a fact they had only recently accepted. He closed the laptop. She doesn't talk about her mother, he said. Not to me, not to anyone. Emma sat slowly in the chair across from him. That's not unusual. Kids don't always have words for that kind of absence. Sometimes they carry it like a bag they think they're not allowed to open. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You talk like you know. Emma didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I lost my dad when I was 6. I don't talk about him much either. There was a pause. Robert leaned forward, elbows on knees. Was it sudden? Military, overseas. One letter, one visit, and that was it. She glanced at Lauren. He gave me a stuffed rabbit before he left. I gave it to her. He looked down at Captain, now wedged between Lauren and the pillow. That was yours? Emma nodded. It felt like the right moment to let go. Silence stretched between them, soft and full. Robert spoke again, quieter this time. I've been a provider, a planner, a protector, but I haven't always been present. I thought I was doing enough by making sure she had everything. Emma's voice was gentle. What she really needed was you. He nodded slowly. I see that now. They sat in stillness for a while. Outside, the sky was turning a deep indigo, headlights glowing far below the hospital windows. Inside, the only sounds were the hum of machines and the occasional rustle of sheets. Then Robert said something unexpected. You should come visit after she's discharged. She's going to miss you. Emma blinked. Visit? As in? She talks about you constantly. You're part of her world now. He hesitated. If you want to be. Emma hesitated too. This was unfamiliar territory. Not professional, not casual. Something in between. Something real. I'm not sure I belong in your world, she said. Maybe my world doesn't work without people like you. There it was again. That stillness between them. Not uncomfortable. Just full of possibility. The next day, Lauren was cleared for release. She was still sore, a little slower, but otherwise healthy. As they packed her things into a tote bag, she held Captain tightly and looked around the hospital room with eyes too thoughtful for her age. Emma helped zip up her hoodie. You're going to do great. Lauren frowned. What if I forget the way back here? Emma crouched beside her. You won't. And even if you do, some places stay with you, even when you're gone. She looked up at Robert. He met her eyes. They didn't say anything else. But when the car pulled away from the hospital, Emma stood by the entrance a long time, her hands in her pockets, watching until the tail lights disappeared around the corner. She didn't know what came next. Neither did he. But somehow they both knew. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The city moved on, as cities always do, indifferent to the quiet tremors in people's lives. Cars flowed, phones buzzed, traffic lights blinked their endless patterns. But for Robert Eldridge, something had shifted that refused to be ignored, no matter how much the outside world pretended it hadn't. Lauren was home. Her room in the penthouse had been waiting for her, untouched but somehow unfamiliar after the sterile comfort of the hospital. The soft cream walls, the shelves of carefully curated books, the designer bedspread, all of it looked perfect. But it was the small stuffed rabbit tucked under her pillow that made the room feel hers again. She asked for Emma the first night. Can she come visit sometime? Lauren asked while Robert was brushing out her hair. He hesitated. Maybe, he said. But the truth was, he didn't know if he could ask her. Not because he didn't want to. Quite the opposite. He didn't know how to invite someone into a world he'd spent years keeping sealed. He was a man used to boardrooms, negotiations, people who spoke in strategy and leverage. Emma spoke in warmth, presence, the kind of language no one had used around him in years. 3 days passed. Then he called her. It was late afternoon. She'd just finished a long shift and was walking home, her coat pulled tight against the wind. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't answer. The number was unknown. but something in her gut told her to pick up. "Emma Blake," she said. "It's Robert." She stopped walking. The city blurred around her. Horns, engines, footsteps. But all she could hear was his voice. "Hi," she said, softer now. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said. "Lauren's been asking for you." "Constantly," Emma smiled. "She's easy to miss." "I was wondering," Robert continued, "if you'd consider coming by. Nothing formal, just maybe a visit. We could have dinner. Nothing fancy. I promise not to try and impress you." Emma laughed, caught off guard by the line, by his voice not sounding like a billionaire, but like a man who wasn't sure how to ask someone for something personal. "Okay," she said. "Yeah?" There was genuine relief in his voice. "Yeah, but I'm only coming if I can bring dessert." "You'd break Lauren's heart if you didn't." That Friday, Emma took the elevator to the top floor of a building she'd only ever seen from street level. The penthouse was quiet when she stepped in. Not cold, not extravagant, just quiet and warm. Robert greeted her at the door, not in a suit, but in jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She almost didn't recognize him without the weight of business clinging to his posture. He looked like someone trying to relearn comfort. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied, holding up a white box. "Lemon shortbread. Made them this morning." "I already regret inviting you," he said with a smirk. "Now I have no excuse to cook badly." She stepped inside and the space surprised her. It wasn't sterile or showy. There were books, a few family photos, a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the amber light of early evening. Lauren came running down the hallway, still in socks, nearly slipping on the hardwood floors. "Emma!" Emma bent just in time to catch her in a hug. "You look like you belong here," Lauren said matter-of-factly. Emma looked at Robert. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Too soon to name, too obvious to ignore. Dinner was simple. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables. Bread warmed in the oven. Emma offered to help, but Robert waved her off. "I'm trying to prove I'm human," he said. Lauren talked most of the meal. She told stories about school, about the book she was reading, about Captain the Rabbit's new backstory as a space explorer. Emma listened with genuine interest, while Robert watched both of them with a strange softness in his gaze, as if he was watching something he thought he'd never have again. After dinner, they sat in the living room. Lauren drew while the adults sipped tea. "This place is not what I expected," Emma said, glancing around. "You expected gold statues and ego?" Robert teased. "Something close," she admitted with a smile. "But this is nice." Real Robert hesitated, then said, "I don't bring many people here." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Because they'll see you're secretly normal? Because they usually want something from me. This is the only place I don't have to perform." Emma looked at him more carefully now. "Is that what this is? You performing?" "No," he said. "This is me forgetting how to perform." There was a silence between them, full but not awkward. The kind of pause that only exists when two people feel safe enough not to fill it. As the night wore on, Emma helped Lauren into bed. She told her a story, one from her own childhood, about a bakery in a seaside town and a cat who stole muffins. Lauren giggled and pulled the blankets up under her chin. "Will you come again?" she asked. Emma looked at her. "If it's okay with your dad." "She's hard to say no to," Robert said from the doorway. When they walked back into the living room, the city was glittering behind the glass like a million tiny stars. "Thank you," Robert said quietly. "For what?" "For not treating me like a headline. And for giving my daughter something I didn't know she was missing." Emma looked at him, her voice gentler now. "She didn't need perfection, just presence." He nodded slowly. "So did I." He walked her to the door, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she said, "Good night, Robert." And he answered, "Come back soon, Emma." And she would, not because he asked, but because she wanted to. The visits became a rhythm before anyone had time to question them. Emma began coming by once a week, sometimes twice. She never announced herself formally, never called ahead, never showed up with expectations. She brought pastries, sometimes books for Lauren, occasionally just her smile. Each time she was welcomed like someone who had always belonged, even if no one said so out loud. Lauren would light up the moment she arrived. Robert watched it happen. The way his daughter's posture relaxed, The way she laughed louder, smiled longer, asked deeper questions. Emma listened like no one else did. And what was more, she understood. She didn't look at Lauren like a fragile glass figure in a billionaire's home. She looked at her like a person. At first, Robert stayed in the background. He'd make tea, take a seat at the edge of the room, sometimes answer emails in silence just to have an excuse to stay nearby. But soon he found himself drawn in. He didn't just want to observe anymore. He wanted to hear what made Emma laugh. He wanted to see the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was explaining something. He wanted her to know him. Not the press version, not the suit, but the man who stayed up until 3 in the morning reading articles about how to talk to your kid about fear. It terrified him because Robert Eldridge didn't fall for people. He partnered, he delegated, he avoided, but Emma didn't give him room for any of that. One evening after Lauren had fallen asleep on the couch mid-movie, her head in Emma's lap and Captain the Rabbit tucked tightly against her side, Emma sat stroking Lauren's hair absently, her expression unreadable. "She's better," she said softly. "But you already know that." Robert sat across from them, legs crossed, one hand wrapped around a glass of untouched wine. "She sleeps through the night now," he said. "That didn't happen before. She's not afraid you'll disappear anymore." Robert's throat tightened. Emma looked up. "And you? Are you still afraid?" He didn't answer right away. Then voice low, "I don't know how to do this. This connection, trust, letting someone in without knowing how they'll leave." Emma shifted gently so as not to wake Lauren. "Most people don't know how. They just do it anyway. Have you? I had to. Life didn't leave me the luxury of hiding. And even when I tried, people saw me anyway." Robert's eyes met hers. "You make it look easy." "It's not." He looked down at the wine in his hand, then set it on the table. "I've built walls around everything. My name, my business, even my daughter. I thought if I controlled everything, nothing could hurt her. Or me." Emma didn't interrupt. She let him speak, which no one ever did. "And then you showed up," he continued, voice quieter now, with a rabbit and a calm voice and a kindness I didn't know how to receive. And suddenly nothing I'd built felt like it was enough. Emma stared at him, her breath shallow. Her heart was pounding, but she didn't look away. "I don't want to confuse what happened in the hospital with something it's not," he added. "I know emotions run high in crisis, but this isn't just about Lauren." "No," she said softly, "it's not." Silence fell between them, thick with truth. Emma gently shifted Lauren's head to a pillow and stood, careful not to disturb the girl's sleep. She walked slowly toward the balcony. Robert followed. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. The city pulsed below them, loud, glittering, alive. Emma leaned on the railing. "Do you ever wonder what you would have done differently if you'd had less money?" she asked. "All the time," he said. "Me too," she admitted, "but from the opposite side." He glanced at her, surprised. Emma continued, "If I'd had more security, maybe I would have let myself dream sooner. Maybe I wouldn't have worked double shifts just to stay numb." She turned to him. "But if I hadn't lost what I did, I might never have found what really matters." They stood in silence again, the sounds of traffic far below them. Robert moved closer, not too close, just enough for the gravity between them to be unmistakable. "I don't know how to do this slowly," he said, "but I also don't want to rush something real." Emma smiled faintly, her eyes shining in the dark. "Then don't rush, just stay." That night when she left, neither of them said goodbye. He walked her to the elevator. She didn't kiss him. He didn't ask. But their fingers brushed briefly before the doors closed, and it said more than words could carry. Later, Robert stood at the window, staring out at the skyline. Lauren was fast asleep in her room. The apartment was quiet. He didn't want to go back to the way things were. Not before the hospital, not before Emma. He knew what it was like to be alone, even when surrounded by power. Now he knew what it meant to be seen. He'd always thought love was a risk, a weakness, a liability. But maybe, just maybe, love was the thing that made everything else finally make sense. And somewhere across the city, in a small apartment above a bakery, Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart still full of that unspoken moment on the balcony. Neither of them had said it, but they both felt it. and neither of them wanted to let it go. The seasons had begun to shift again. Spring, once only a promise, had taken full hold of the city. The trees lining the sidewalks bloomed in pale pinks and whites. Windows stayed open longer. Children's voices returned to parks. The world seemed to be breathing differently, fuller, lighter. So were they. Lauren recovered fully in the weeks following her discharge. The hospital became a memory she spoke of, like a place she had visited briefly. Not as a trauma, but as a turning point. She kept Captain the Rabbit with her at all times, even though she didn't clutch him the way she once did. He sat by her pillow. He joined her for breakfast. Sometimes she made him tiny capes and missions to complete while she was at school. Emma was now a regular presence in their lives, not just in Lauren's room or on the sofa, but in the kitchen, the garden terrace, the spaces between things. She came over on weekends, sometimes during the week, sometimes just for tea. Her shifts had changed. She took fewer night hours, allowed herself rest. She wasn't working less, just differently. She had room now, not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd finally chosen to take it. Robert didn't name what they were becoming, neither did she. But it was there, in the way he remembered how she took her coffee, no sugar, just oat milk, in the way she folded Lauren's drawings with care when she took them home, in the way he called her late at night just to hear her voice, even if they said nothing for minutes at a time. One Saturday morning, Emma arrived early. She carried a paper bag of pastries and a small potted plant, something she said she saw at a corner market and couldn't not bring. Lauren greeted her in pajamas, sleep still clinging to her eyes, but with a grin so wide it was impossible not to mirror it. Robert, still in a worn t-shirt and jeans, looked like he hadn't expected to be seen that early. And also, like he didn't mind. They had breakfast on the balcony. It wasn't fancy, just eggs, toast, berries, and too many croissants. But it was the kind of meal that stretched over hours, full of laughter and pauses that didn't need to be filled. Lauren disappeared halfway through to draw on the floor of the living room, humming to herself. Emma leaned on the balcony railing, looking out at the city. Robert stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "She seems lighter," Emma said, glancing back inside. "She is," he replied. "You've been a part of that." Emma looked at him, the wind brushing her hair back gently. "So have you." There was a long pause between them, but it didn't feel suspended or tense. It felt like waiting for the right moment. And when Robert finally spoke, it was slow, measured. "I've spent most of my life preparing for worst-case scenarios," he said. "Contracts, contingency plans, backup systems, everything built to survive disaster." Emma listened without interrupting. She always did. But none of it prepared me for the idea that love, real love, doesn't feel like a risk. He paused. "It feels like coming home." Her eyes shimmered, not from surprise, but from the recognition of something she had tried not to believe in for a long time. "You don't have to say anything," he added quickly. "I just needed you to know that I see this. All of this. You, Lauren, United States. I see it." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "So do I." That evening, after Lauren had gone to bed and the city outside had dimmed to a sea of quiet light, Emma stayed longer than usual. She helped clean the kitchen. They sat on the couch in the hush of the apartment, music playing softly from a speaker in the corner. There was no moment where one of them said, "This is it." No grand confession, no speech. Robert simply reached for her hand and laced his fingers through hers, and she didn't let go. Eventually, he walked her to the elevator, like he always did. But this time, when the doors opened, she didn't step inside right away. She looked at him. He looked at her. And then she kissed him. Not out of passion or urgency, but out of peace, out of knowing, out of finally allowing what had been building quietly to rise to the surface. When they pulled away, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The doors closed behind her, and Robert leaned against the wall, eyes closed, smiling faintly to himself in a way he hadn't in years. In her apartment that night, Emma sat on the edge of her bed, Captain the Rabbit tucked beside her. Not hers anymore, but still a part of the story. She thought of Lauren's laugh, of Robert's voice when he wasn't trying to be anyone, of the way something broken in all three of them had started to mend, not with glue but with presence, with trust, with choice. It hadn't happened all at once. There was no single moment that fixed everything. But somewhere along the way, a little girl gave away her last treasure. And because of that small act of kindness, a man with everything discovered what it meant to feel again. And a woman who had only ever known how to survive finally found somewhere to rest. They weren't perfect, but they were together. And that, in the end, was everything. This story ends not with a wedding, a dramatic twist, or a perfect resolution, but with something far more real, a quiet beginning. At its core, this was never just a story about a billionaire, a nurse, and a little girl. It was a story about healing, about how people who carry invisible grief find one another in the most unexpected places: a hospital room, a whispered promise, a rabbit passed from one hand to another. Robert, Emma, and Lauren each began their journey holding something broken: a heart guarded by success, a memory clutched through survival, and a child's innocence tested by fear. And yet, through moments of presence and honesty, they formed something stronger than the lives they had built alone. They formed family, not defined by blood, but by love freely given. I didn't want to give you a fairy tale ending. I wanted to give you an earned one. One where no one is saved by perfection, but by showing up again and again and again. Because sometimes the most powerful story isn't the one that ends with fireworks. It's the one that ends with someone staying and meaning it.